Welcome everyone. Very nice to see you on this sunny afternoon. Thanks for coming in. This is the finale of a wonderful study day on multiple identities and material culture, and I'm very delighted to join in this brilliant and happy collaboration between the London College of Fashion and the Oxford Centre for Life Writing. My name's Hermione Lee, and I founded the Life Writing Centre here 14 years ago in 2011 when I was president of the college, and this was exactly the kind of interdisciplinary, cross-cultural and collaborative programme that I dreamt of when we set it up. We have had international conferences here in the past on lives of dance and lives of objects and lives of houses, which became an Occlu book, which I co-edited with Kate Kennedy. So today's theme of multiple identities is a perfect fit and a brilliant addition to Occlu's history. So my very grateful personal thanks to Alice Little, to Kate Kennedy, to the college for all its support, and to everyone who has helped create this day, and that is principally our wonderful visiting scholar Claire Wilcox, whom some of you have already got to know and have heard during the course of the day. We're very, very lucky to have Claire here as a visitor to Occlu. As you know, probably, Claire is Professor in Fashion Curation and Cultural Programming at the University of Arts London, with whom we're in collaboration today, and was Senior Curator of Fashion at the V&A. She's curated some of the most famous fashion history exhibitions of our times, including 10 years ago, Alexander McQueen's Savage Beauty, which she was talking a little bit about earlier on. And she's the author of a wonderfully original prize-winning book called Patchwork, A Life Among Clothes. And if you haven't happened to have read it, I recommend that you immediately read it. She talks a great deal in that book about how collections are created and curated. And here's one striking sentence. Sorted, categorized, catalogued, numbered. The collective collections represent the gathering together of excellence, of history, taste, and skill. Excellence, history, taste and skill. That's a description of Claire's work. Claire is going to introduce and be in conversation with Alexandra Pringle, the legendary publisher, editor-in-chief at Bloomsbury, one-time renowned literary agent, writer, and visiting professor at the Centre for Fiction at Manchester Metropolitan. It's a great pleasure and privilege for us to have Alexandra here today, and it's a very special pleasure for me to introduce her because we go back a long way to Alexandra's days from 1978, I think, as one of the first members of Virago Press, where she was editor of the Virago Modern Classics. I'm very delighted to see a couple of them sitting there, including by one of my favourite authors. And I still remember the day that Alexandra and I went to interview Eudora Welty in 1988. It was one of the
Basil Street Hotel
of our life. Yeah. And since then, I have watched with awe over many decades the progress of her mighty career in the literary world, which has included looking after and shaping the careers of a great many world-famous international writers. I'm not going to list them because we'd be here for a long and splendid time. Now she's writing what promises to be a remarkable memoir called Caravan about the origins of her ancient family of Berber Jewish traders. But I'm going to leave Claire to talk to her about this fascinating history, and after that there will be time for questions. So please make our two wonderful guests very welcome. Thank you.
Well, so now I get to ask you the questions, having been the subject of your scrutiny in the past. So.
I know. I was Claire's editor on her book Patchwork, which is actually one of my favourite books that I published in the 40 years that I was a publisher.
My visits to you, I always thought were like mental acupuncture. You know, I'd come out sort of startled and sorted. Anyway, we're not here to talk about me, we're here to talk about you. And my first question is, what was the book that when you were growing up had the greatest impact on you? Because I'm assuming you grew up in quite a bookish family.
I grew up in a very bookish family. Both my parents were teachers, and they brought me books in different ways. So my father gave me Pride and Prejudice to read when I was 11, and that was possibly the most profoundly changing book for me. But my mother gave me novels that I then was part of we republished at Virago, including Rosamund Lehman's Dusty Answer. And she gave it to me when I was 14, and she said, I read this book when I was young and it changed my life, and she gave it to me. And I've never dared read it again because I think it might go to... I reread all of Rosamund Lehman's over and over again, but not that one, because I'm terrified it'll disappear like a cobweb. But I did give it to Donna Tartt to read, and she loved it. So I think I must read it again.
You must. Well, I mean, that brings me on very nicely to Virago, which you joined. You were in your early 20s.
Yes.
Can you tell us a bit about the atmosphere at that time? And it must have been febrile and exciting and challenging.
It was very exciting, very challenging, and very frightening, and very exhausting. I was the fourth person to join. We were in a tiny room at the top of a lot of stairs in Soho between pinball arcades and sex shops. And there was a so-called gentleman's drinking club underneath us. And I was hired as what we in those days used to call the shit worker, which was basically being Carmen Khalil's assistant. And Carmen Khalil founded Virago. She's an extraordinary woman, inspirational, world-changing woman in her way, but she was also a bully. I mean, a real bully. So it was very hard. I had never been bullied before in my life, and it took me many years to actually get over it. But I was there for 12 years, so I'm the only person who started as her assistant who actually survived. Her.
But during that time, very wonderfully, you took over the Modern Classics series, and we've got a couple here from my own library. You know, they were so important to women of my generation. You know, we were joining women's groups, going to Greenham Common, reading the women's press as well, Spare Rib. And what was amazing about the Modern Classics series was that you were retrieving women writers from an earlier age and presenting them in the most sort of delightful and covetable way. I mean, they were quite expensive at the time. I remember saving up. But it was a real sort of badge of pride to have a row of these green spines in one's bookshelf. And I was just wondering if you could tell us, apart from the ones that you read when you were younger, but how did you find these books before the age of the internet?
Well, we were very lucky because we had a network of incredible people to advise us, Hermione being one of them. And in fact, the first non-fiction book I ever had anything to do with editing was Hermione's incredible book about Willa Cather. And Willa Cather was one of my favourite writers on that series. And in fact, you know, Michael Holroyd was very important to the classic series. He was a very close friend of Carmen's, and I think it was he that really brought Antonia White to her notice, and Sylvia Townsend Warner. So we listened to people, we talked to people, and then we just read and selected as we went. And it was Carmen's brainchild, it was her series, and I slowly started working on the series because I was the other person in the company who was passionate about those sorts of writers. So it just developed of its own accord, slowly, painfully, and wonderfully too.
Wonderfully.
Yeah.
And the covers are beautiful, all by women artists.
Not all. Not all of them. No. Sadly, you know, I don't think we would have found enough. But Carmen and I used to choose the covers together.
Did you?
And it was one of the great joys. Was we both became experts in what I would call second layer painters, and it's that interesting thing we found which is that first-class paintings didn't make good book covers on the whole. Masterpieces didn't. They were too known. They brought too much to the reader, to the person who was picking the book up, whereas obscure paintings worked much better. But we did become experts in women painters, particularly of the sort of early 20th century. And we also used to go around the Royal Academy Summer Exhibition at breakneck speed because Carmen couldn't be bothered to spend more than 2 seconds in front of any paintings and just choose things as we went, you know. I'd be there writing it down, you know.
Such a lovely marriage of image and text, you know. It's so satisfying when you to me, got it right 99% of the time. I just think it's lovely, and I appreciated them as artifacts, not just as things to read.
Well, we wanted that. That was a very important part of that series.
Then you became an agent.
Yes, well, there was an interim thing, which was that I was at Virago for 12 years, man and boy. And I began, as I said, as the office assistant, and I ended up as editorial director and also owning a bit of the company because we were sold and then we bought ourselves back out again, and it was all very complicated. But at the end of the 12 years, we were independent again, and we were backed by Rothschild Ventures, and I was 36, and I was thinking that really it was time I left home. And I had thought that I was unemployable in the outside world because Virago was very different from mainstream publishing. And I think, you know, actually having been bullied, I didn't have a very strong sense of self. I was very lucky in that I did I actually went part-time for a few years, and I did an MPhil, which I never finished. And I was taken on by an amazing man called Carl Miller, who had founded the London Review of Books and was professor at University College London. And he was the person that actually started rebuilding my confidence and sense of self. But nevertheless, I didn't have a very strong one. But I had thought that it was really time I was, you know, grown up. And at that time, there was a sort of a revolution within the company, which is that Rothschild Ventures, our backers, said we needed to change ourselves. We were a management team. We were too old. We were too many of us. We knew each other too well. And they basically asked me if I would take over running the editorial side. And I was given a week to think about it. And I remember going into the lavatories with my boss then, Ursula Owen, and we cried. And it would have meant her leaving and me taking over her job. And at that time, I was offered a job by Hamish Hamilton, which was part of the Penguin Group, as editorial director then. It was a literary imprint within the Penguin Group, and it was, you know, a really good list. And so I accepted it. And actually, interestingly, both of us left because Ursula left too of her own volition and went to work for the Labour Party and then became editor-in-chief of Index on Censorship. So it was a great change. And I went into the corporate world for 4 years. I learned an enormous amount. And I learned also that I hated corporate life. And I was too old and for me, politics had a capital P and meant changing the world, but within corporations, politics has a small p and it's all about your own career. And it seemed to me that as an editor, as a publisher, all of your energy has to go out towards the author and their books and not inside. And it felt just wrong to me, so I jumped out, as other editors were doing at the time, and became an agent.
And your relationship with the writers that you nurtured in your work as an agent, can you describe the different relationship an agent has to an author as opposed to an editor has to an author?
As I had been an editor for a long time before, I obviously brought that to agenting, and not all agents do edit. They're all completely different, but for me, I couldn't not edit. So that was part of it. But the simple way of describing it is that as an agent, 100% of what you do is for your author, whereas as an editor, you have to balance the needs and the best thing for the author and the needs of the publishing company as well, and what is right for the publishing company. So you're between the two, and you have to make that work. An agent has to also get on with the publishers. It's important that they have good relationship, and nevertheless, the beginning and the end of their lives is for their authors. And I found that easy. I liked that about it because it was simple.
We actually share an agent, don't we?
We do.
Perhaps we shouldn't go there, but complicated. Are you finding it easier now you're a writer as opposed to an editor with your agent?
With my agent, yes. I mean, he wouldn't mind me saying this. He's absolutely wonderful. I couldn't love my agent more, also Claire's agent. But when I was a publisher, we used to row. And I don't like rowing. I don't easily do it. But he used to just, because he's quite a dramatic person himself. And I would be in my office and I'd slam the phone down and I'd say to my colleagues, I am never talking to that man again. And the funny thing is that when I was looking for an agent, I had thought that I would want a nurturing woman. And then I thought, no, because everybody knows who I am in publishing. And so he doesn't, whoever it is, he, she, doesn't have to explain me because they know who I am. I basically want a cowboy or a buccaneer to ride into town, shoot the gun and ride out again. And David was the best cowboy I knew.
Yeah.
He had also, said to me a number of times, if you write, I want to represent you, which was lovely.
It is lovely. But before you embarked on this new career as a writer, you were editor-in-chief at Bloomsbury for over 2 decades. How incredible is that? I mean, what was it like? Your list of writers that Hermione didn't want to list, and I don't want to list either. But I mean, the awards, the accolades, the careers that you've nurtured from, sticking with an author like, so for example, with Esther Freud, publishing Hideous Kinky, and then nurturing that relationship through many years of her not writing, and then picking it up again. That's commitment, isn't it?
Well, commitment to me comes easily to me. What I feel about editing is that in the end, it is all about your own taste and it's all about your belief in a writer. And for all that publishing companies like to make out that they know what they're doing, they don't. No one knows what they're doing. So all you have is what you believe in, and that's what I feel young editors need to nurture in themselves. And as their boss, for me, it's helping them gain confidence was a really important part of what I did. But, when I joined Bloomsbury, I had no idea if I was going to be any good at it. They approached me. I thought I was going to be an agent for the rest of my life. But it was the publishing company, in some ways, I most admired. Independent, editorially led, but, with muscle, it could really publish effectively. And I love the ethos, and the previous editor-in-chief, Liz Calder, was a sort of goddess in publishing and had an amazing career, still had an amazing career. And when she asked me if I would take over from her, I took 4 months to think about it because I knew it was the most important decision of my career. But in a way, it shouldn't have taken more than 4 minutes. But it felt like such a responsibility to my authors, who some of them had gone with me from Virago to Hamish Hamilton to agency, to then turn around and say, I'm moving on. But it was terrifying going to Bloomsbury. I'll be absolutely frank. I had no idea if I was able to do it. And I had to learn an enormous amount. I arrived just as Harry Potter was taking off, which was an extraordinary thing, which was marvellous in lots of ways, but it meant the children's division completely held the company, and the adult division was like that much, It was the anorexic bit of the company. And that was a daunting thing to sort of build that. But I just feel I was very lucky. I was very lucky in my colleagues. I think the one thing my mother taught me, one of the many things my mother taught me was resilience. And I think I'm stubborn. And so I just put one foot in front of the other. But I had no idea that I would ever get a prize winner or anything, or, a book like Eat, Pray, Love that sold millions of copies, or Song of Achilles, or you just don't know. You have no idea, and it's an odd mix of magic, stubbornness, taste. I think to be a good editor, you have to have a mixture of incredible resilience and able to take failure, because failure is part of your daily life. You fail more than you succeed. And also incredible optimism that something will work eventually.
But I mean, in the case of Eat, Pray, Love, I think it was turned down by everyone.
Yeah, I was the only person who offered on it.
Yeah.
But I had read a previous book of hers called The Last American Man, and I knew she was a really good writer. So I took the manuscript home to read immediately. And I have a thing with when I was reading manuscripts, that when I start thinking of all the people I want to give a book to, it's a sign. And as I was reading the manuscript, I was thinking, I want to give this to Esther Freud to read, or whoever. But no one else in my company wanted it, apart from my amazing assistant, who now owns her own publishing company in India. And we were the only people. So I managed to sort of take it on, despite everybody saying, woo, why do we want to publish this woo-woo, yoga practicing, navel-gazing woman? None of those things of which I was. I now do yoga, but I never dreamt of doing it in those days, let alone gaze at my navel. I was too busy getting through life. But I just loved the book, and I loved her writing, and I wanted her to be my companion. I wanted her to be my friend. And of course, that is what millions of women ended up feeling. But it took 4 years for that book to take off in the UK. And I knew that having the word pray in the title was a disaster. And we changed the title. I cannot remember what we changed it to. But just before we went to press, I thought, it's going to be a bestseller in America. We have to go with the title. But I know it kept it back in the UK. And I was so boring to our sales department. I'd send them emails every week saying, look, it's doing this in the Philippines, or, saying that. And then with our edition, it took off in Australia, South Africa, Ireland, and India before it actually hit the UK. So it was 4 years afterwards that it got to number 1.
It's an amazing story, and it makes me want to ask about book titles. And exhibition titles are very important, huge debate about what they should be called. I imagine book titles, are there big meetings with everyone shouting at each other saying,
No.
How does it happen?
You do not want too many people to be involved in these decisions, in any decisions in publishing, actually.
Fewer the better.
The fewer the better, definitely.
Yes.
But some titles come easily and have their life very quickly, and some don't. And some I regret. There's a novel I published a few years ago. Actually, the author's just got a new book coming out in a couple of weeks. She's called Zofka Zinoviev, and it's an incredible novel. It's a sort of Lolita story told from a girl's point of view. And it's called Putney. Why I didn't say, Zofka, we have to change this title, I don't know. I don't even like Putney. I went to school in Putney. It's like, really? And I know that title did that book no service whatsoever. And then one of the books I'm proudest of ever publishing in my life is a novel called A Paragon by Colin McCann, the Irish writer. I begged him to change that title. It's the worst title in the world. And he refused. And in the end, of course, the author has to have the final say. But I know it harmed it. I know. I mean, A Paragon, really?
I mean, when we were trying to decide on the title for Patchwork,
Yes.
It took a year. And at the beginning, it was called Patchwork. And at the end, it was called Patchwork. In the middle, it was called many other things. But the critically good thing was we split the word up into two, so it was patchwork, which seemed important.
It was very important. I still think it is.
And that break in words, it brings a whole other... It makes it more precise. Patchwork was too crafty, but
Patchwork, you immediately see a quilt.
I know, exactly, but...
Patchwork.
Patchwork was much better because we all work hard and we patch things together. So you... stepped down from Bloomsbury 2 years ago?
Yes.
Is that right?
Yes.
And you haven't been very busy. You have done so much. You have significantly improve the lives of writers who go onto your writing courses in Morocco. So I read. Can you tell us about that and about Silk Road slippers generally?
Yeah, so before I left Bloomsbury, I had a colleague called Faisal Khan, who, in fact, I had to head up the list in Bloomsbury in Delhi, but her visa ran out, and because of Modi, she couldn't stay in India. She's from Pakistan. And so she came to London to work for us there. And she decided she's not suited to institutional life of any sort, and she knew I was going to leave, so she bailed out before I did, and she dreamt up this little company called Silk Road Slippers, and it really came out of things that we share, which is a love of travel, a love of shopping, and a love of writing, not in no particular order. And she wanted to bring with her people who were friends and who we shared those three things. So there was me and Alex von Tunstallman, the historian and screenwriter, and Nesreen Malik, the Guardian journalist. And what was important to us was that we came from very different backgrounds. So we were international, we were outward looking. And we started by traveling, doing our normal travels, and buying stuff and creating a shop online, which was enormous fun. And that's to do with a love of stories and storytelling and our belief that objects and things carry stories with them. And I've always bought things wherever I've been, and I have a very cluttered houseboat where I live, which is full of very treasured objects. And I love textiles, and so I buy a lot of those. So I bought a lot of vintage textiles in Pakistan, particularly when I went to the Lahore festival. So I would travel for literary festivals, which I loved doing, and then I'd shop, and then we'd sell them. And but what the core of our business is teaching writing. And there is a beautiful hotel in the Palmery in Marrakesh, who I knew the owners of that hotel from years back when I would find them authors for literary weekends. So I went straight to them and said, can we run our masterclasses there? And they said yes, immediately. And so we run masterclasses twice a year, and we have a maximum of 14 people coming. And on the whole, they're very high-achieving professionals, very interesting people from all over the world, many, many, many different countries. A lot of actually journalists, academics, and lawyers, interestingly, all people who use language but want to express themselves in more creative ways. And it's like a boot camp. It's a very intense...
Or a book camp.
A book camp, yes. 5 days. But really exciting and inspirational to see how their work can develop in such a short time. And for me to use my 40 years of editing, to be able to use it in a different way is thrilling and really exciting. And we've formed friendships and bonds, and we now, there's some people who are coming back for their third course, which is amazing. And we also do day classes on my boat.
I suppose it's a bit of a simplistic question, but if you have a writer who is a lawyer, say, for example, uses words in a lawyery way, how do you open that door into writing?
Okay, the first one I ever taught, we do a one-to-one, where each person has a one-to-one with one of the three of us that teach, and they give us a piece of writing. And I looked at, she actually naughtily gave me 2 pieces of writing, which she shouldn't have, and she's a barrister. And she came in, and I said, "This is not your voice." And she started crying. And at the end of it, she said, "You've shot 3 bullets into my heart." And she has now discovered her voice, and she is writing the most sensationally beautiful stories set on the borderlands of Pakistan and Afghanistan, where she comes from. And it's utterly thrilling. So there are many different ways, but in this case, it was a gun.
Do you think that anyone can be a writer, or do you? I mean,
That's a really interesting question. I think that if somebody wants it enough, then probably yes. But I think it's like, I have this joke, when people come and say, I think I've got a book in me. On the whole, I'd say, keep it there. It's like, why go through? I mean, I'm going through it now. I'm really understanding what it's like. But why go through it unless you really have to do it? And I think if you really have to do it, then yes, I think you can. I mean, to varying degrees, but also everybody has a story to tell, and stories are such wonderful things, and that's really what Silk Road Slippers is about. It's about the telling of stories in whatever way. And so I did an event at the Bradford Literature Festival with lovely John Mitchison, who has a company called Unbound, and he
Wonderful podcasts.
Yeah, exactly, backlisted, which I've been on a couple of times. And he said at it, everyone should tell their story. Whether or not they're going to get published is a different thing, because that's harder. But yes, everyone should tell their stories.
Well, talking of telling stories, you've made the journey from editor to agent to publisher, and now you are telling your own story. How's it going?
It's so mad. It's your fault, Claire. I entirely blame Claire because when reading Patchwork was an extraordinary experience for me. I mean, not least because actually it needed no editing because her writing is so beautiful, but because what you did with the form of memoir was so sort of quietly revolutionary. And I thought, you can do anything you like. You can literally do anything you want. And something happened inside me. And then I started putting little bits of my life onto Instagram. I mean, social media is a rather amazing creature that you can use it in so many different ways. And it was really interesting, the responses I was getting. And so I didn't realize this was all bubbling. I was still at Bloomsbury and hadn't thought that I would write. And people would say, in the industry, why don't you write a memoir? And I thought, the last thing the world wants is a publisher's memoir, and there have been some pretty dreadful ones, apart from the incredible Diane Athill. And so I just like, no, I'd rather die than write a memoir. But I found, and then reconnecting with Marrakesh through Silk Road Slippers, and suddenly being in this country where my mother had come from, and I didn't know because of this thing of unknown things in families. And it's also to do with crossing the threshold into 70. And I had in my head for years that I wanted to wake up on my 70th birthday in the desert. I don't know why, but I had this absolute maggot in my brain. And I asked my son if he would come with me into the desert to stay the night on my birthday, and he said yes. And he and I have been traveling since he was little. And we did that. And it was an incredible experience. So all these things were happening together, but it was becoming old. And I realized the book is becoming a lot about growing old. That's without me knowing it was going to happen. And wondering who I was. Who is this young woman who I would see turning a corner in a bit of London? I could glimpse her and wonder, because I've never looked back. I've only ever looked forwards. I've only been in the present and looking forward. I never look back. And because of getting old, you do start looking back. And
you do.
And your book, and because we're almost exactly the same age and came from the same bit of London and experienced many similar things, I think you took me back. So you really did have a very profound effect on me. So I just found, one summer, I have a house in France. I just got up early every morning and just started writing. And it was an entirely happy experience until it became public. But that secret summer, when I was just writing for my own self, was how it started, really.
Well, very wonderfully, we're going to be privileged enough to hear an extract from, if this is a good moment for you.
Yes, sure.
Sure. This book is not finished, I don't think.
No.
And definitely not published. So
no, it's this first draft.
It's a great honour for us to hear this.
It's very much first draft. And so the book is, it's about discovering who I was, but importantly discovering who my mother was. So my mother was called Natalie Afriat, that was her maiden name, and her parents lived in Casablanca, and she had nothing to do with them, she loathed them. And she would say, you don't have to love your parents because they're your parents, they have to earn your love. And they would send checks and she'd send them back. And we never saw them until I was 17 and my grandfather was dying and we went out to see them. And there were these entirely foreign people. He was called Masud Afriat, and he spoke 4 or 5 languages, all of them quite badly. But our mother never told us. She said, "Oh, I'm a bit foreign," she'd say. "You have a bit of Spanish in you," like a quarter Spanish, she'd say, leaving a quarter of us like hanging in the air. And actually, her family were ancient Berber, Moroccan, or Amazi, as one's supposed to say, and it's right to say, Amazi Jews who came to Morocco from Palestine 2,000 years ago, probably on Phoenician ships. And my great-great-great-great-grandfather was burnt alive in 1792 for not converting to Islam. But which was a very unusual thing because the relationship between Jews and Muslims in Morocco was a very happy story in the main. So I wanted, and I just didn't know anything about any of this. So, I've gone on this journey, I'm on this journey, and I've literally been on great journeys with my son, who is now, he's going to be 39 tomorrow. And we've driven through Morocco and we've gone through Mauritania on the caravan route and we've ridden on camels together. And I hope we're going to get to Timbuktu. It's incredibly dangerous, but I think I've found a way because my mother's family had caravans that went from Timbuktu to Essaouira. And so they were in a place, they were deposited by these Phoenician ships. In Morocco 2,000 years ago, in the mouth of the river Wad Noon, and they ended up in the Anti-Atlas in Ifrane, where my ancestor was burned. I could read a tiny bit about the burning, and then I'll go on. Shall I do that? Or not? No, I'll go on to...
it's entirely up to you. I mean,
no, I don't know. Okay, no, I'll do the river Wad Noon. I'll do one bit of the journey and one bit of the Afriats. Sorry, I'm just okay. So this is my family when they moved to Essaouira, which is the Jewish cemeteries in Essaouira stuffed with my relatives, as we found when we went there eventually. So this is the beginning of the 19th century. A new century, winds sweep down the Atlantic coast to Essaouira on the Barbary coast, a walled town perched on the ends of the earth, the waves of the Atlantic breaking at its shores. The Phoenicians traded on its islands. Jews were there since the 6th century BC. Carthaginians built a settlement there, and in the 1st century, King Gilbert II of Mauritania built a factory for purple dye from mollusks gathered from the seabed, the dye used for the robes of Roman aristocrats and nobles. At the beginning of the 15th century, the Portuguese built a trading post and fortress and named it Mogador from the Middle Ages until the 17th century. There were sugarcane refineries in the vicinity of the town, and the trade was in the hands of the Jews. It was to be a city made for the needs of foreign merchants. In the region were all the things most wanted by Europeans: olive oil, ostrich feathers, goat skins, gum arabic, and almonds. The most important Jewish families of Morocco sent members of their families there. The Sultan chose 10 of them and gave them the title of Tajir al-Sultan, merchant of the king. Amongst them were the Afriats. In 1760, the city was renamed Essaouira, the word from the Arabic swira, meaning small fortress or little rampart. The cries of seagulls and the crashing of waves accompanied the lives of the inhabitants of this town, its great sandy sweep of beach, the Portuguese fort dominating the town. There were palm trees and rubber plants and pine trees, rows of cannons pointing towards the sea. In the Kasbah, merchants sold grilled grasshoppers in glass jars and boiled acorns, dried lizards and butterfly wings, fish fresh caught. The city smelt of damp stone and fish, of strong coffee and cats. The call of the muezzin punctuated the day. A swallow swooped overhead, always the wind blowing through the streets and courtyards, shaking open windows, sneaking under doors. Some of them doors. You can tell I'm not used to reading, can't you? Some of the inhabitants of the town were descendants of the Abid, an elite corps of black soldiers, originally slaves imported on the trans-Saharan trade route. Around the port, hawkers, petty artisans, beggars, and others scrape a living. Essaouira was a town of fish and many Jews who made their living as wholesalers of anchovies and sardines. Most of the Afriats migrated from the Sousse and settled in Essaouira, its white lime-walled houses with secluded courtyards and blue shutters and doors giving them shelter. And then I'll just do a very short bit about I'm now with my son. I would be if I could find it. Hold on.
Did you number your pages?
Yeah, I did, but I've managed to do it all in. Okay. Today we drive to the mouth of the river Wad Noon, the mouth of the river where the Afriats arrived, most probably in Phoenician ships from the Mediterranean. We move through a barren landscape, past piles of smelly trash, past herbs that are a mixture of sheep and goats with herders on donkeys. There are hotels that have lost their spirit and quietly died. There are low stone walls enclosing nothing. Just two fields with olive trees braving the Atlantic winds. The waves crash and crash below. The burnt sienna ground stretches on and on. We arrive at the mouth of the river. It is dry and barren. We walk on the riverbed where houses have been half built and abandoned. I pick up a shell from the bed of the river. Daniel notices a track leading up the hillside, and we set off, hoping our little Picanto car will make it. I think I'll just stop there.
That's absolutely fantastic. I mean, I'm just going to clap.
Sorry.
It's so vivid, one can almost sort of see it, and I think the writing in the present tense really, really helps to make it so immediate.
Well, I'm trying to, because the past stuff is in the past tense, and I'm doing the driving in the present. But I don't know if it's working yet, because this is all work in progress, and I keep noticing words I've repeated, and the editor is like, "Oh God, that's."
but it's so extraordinary. This, because often family histories very rarely go back 2,000 years, and I'm wondering what happened to all the stuff, what happened to all the things, what happened to all the objects, because you've got the narrative.
We have no objects.
No objects.
And we have no objects except when I went to Casablanca, when my grandfather was dying, a man arrived at the door, and he was even more foreign than my grandparents. And he gave my mother something, and I had never seen anything like it before. And I became obsessed with it. I didn't know what it was. And when my mother died, it was the first thing I picked up. I didn't even talk to my brothers about it. And it was a silver hand of Fatima. And I'd never heard of a hand of Fatima. I didn't know what they were. And I didn't know, of course, which I think is very important to me, is that they are very important for both Muslims and Jews. And for me, I have very close relationship. My relationship with Islam is very close at the moment for all sorts of reasons, for work and people that I know. And it feels to me as if this thing is, one of the things that's between us, in a beautiful way. Anyway, this one has a dagger in the middle of it. So that's the only object I have.
Well, I think we've learnt from today's presentations that you only need one object to unfold all these extraordinary stories and all this history. Has it changed how you feel about yourself, your identity?
When I came back from my journey through Morocco with Daniel, a friend said to me, "What is the biggest thing that you come away with?" And without thinking, I said, "I don't feel English." That just came out of my... So I've been profoundly changed by it. And I now understand all sorts of things about myself, like my obsession with wide open spaces. As somebody many years ago said to me when I was in my early 20s, he said, "You have a thing about wide open spaces." I now understand things about myself, absolutely. And my mother, crucially, because this is quite a lot about my mother and my mother's life. And she walked away from her family. And I admire her a lot for it. And she was a very tough woman. She, I think, made it possible for me to manage Carmen Khalil years later. But yeah, I'm still learning. And it's a strange process, as you know, when you excavate. You don't know what's going to lie in wait for you, do you?
No, but the excavation you've been doing is so dramatic and so powerful. I think it's so journeying. Mm. You're not only journeying in your mind and your memory and your family history, but you're also physically going out, and I think that's the extraordinary thing. I know you've always travelled a lot, but your physical journeys with Daniel, you don't know what you're going to uncover. You didn't know about all the gravestones, for example. That must have been a very powerful.
We went to Casablanca and found my grandfather's gravestone. And a man in the cemetery said, "We can clean it for you for $200 or something." And Daniel and I really laughed because my mother would have been so angry if we'd spent money on cleaning his gravestone. It was so funny. But you know what really surprised me was that it was Mauritania that was the most extraordinary experience. I thought it would be Morocco, but it was Mauritania because it was so extreme there, so absolutely elemental, and we slept in the desert, and we slept in an oasis, and we swam in a pool in an oasis, and we rode on these camels, and you could feel what it was like for our ancestors on these caravans and how harsh it was. And I think that incredible spirit of resilience that my mother had and that I think I have comes from that. And that was a physical thing that Daniel and I went through. And it was so beautiful, and it was so unlike anything I'd ever seen. So it's the most unexpected things have been the most powerful, I think. And also just being with him in this way.
Because in a way, you're finding his legacy as well.
I'm finding his, and he's finding his, and he, like me, has been obsessed with the Middle East.
Well, he's a Middle East correspondent.
He is. He's head of news on Middle East Eye, and all his colleagues come from all over the Middle East, from Syria and Lebanon and Egypt, and I took him to Yemen when he was 11. I took him up the Nile when he was 9. He once said to me, "Mum, you took me to such batshit crazy places when I was young." And he's now in that world. And so we're there, and none of our other relatives have that thing that we have, And also our Jewishness. I mean, I don't feel particularly Jewish, but he does, he says. And so we're having these conversations, and they're really interesting.
It seems like a good moment to sort of take breath and for me to ask somebody what the time is, because I'm typically completely lost track of time, and I don't know whether we can keep talking or whether it's time for questions.
It's 20 past 6.
What does that mean? Does that mean... Keep going. You can move on to audience questions whenever you're ready. Okay. So let's ask you a few more questions and then open it up to the audience, because when we're thinking about journeys and identity and retrieval and the gaps, the impact on, this is going sort of right back, the impact on you growing up knowing or not knowing, that must have been quite sort of haunting. Were you aware of the absence?
No, I wasn't. I was very happy in my family. We were a really close family, and I had a really happy childhood. I was incredibly lucky. I had 2 brothers, and I'm writing about my childhood as well. So I don't, I have other friends who are Jewish and who were never told they were Jewish, and they're angry with their parents for never telling them and for keeping their secrets. I'm not angry with my mother. I think that's fine. She walked out when she was 16, having rowed with her father, having gone to see Gone with the Wind, and she walked into her future, and she became a driver in the ATS during the war, and she made her life. She went to art school. She made her life with her own two hands. And it's up to her if she wanted to keep it secret. What fascinated me is that one of the series of books I published at Virago that I particularly loved were novels of the Harlem Renaissance. No one was interested in those days. I did Zora Neale Hurston and Nella Larsen and so on, and I loved those books, and they were, a lot of them, about passing. And, Dorothy West and Nella Larsen. And of course, that's what my mother did. She passed. And it took me centuries to realize that. And I think that's incredibly interesting. And my best friend for 20 years was a novelist who was also passing. And, I'm very interested in that, but I don't feel that it was a disturbance in me. It's just like I had this treasure trove to find out later.
Absolutely. And I think you have a short piece about your mother in that part of the paper.
Not about my mother, actually, just about a childhood, because I know I didn't bring my mother with me. I don't know why. I think because I'm still in the process of excavating her.
I completely understand.
So I have if you want to hear just a little short piece, which is my childhood, and the two very little ones.
We'd love to, yes.
If you want, I will get them in order before I start, rather than, messing it up midway. So it's really about a friend of mine who I grew up with, because there is another theme in the book, which is friendship, actually, and friendships that I had with particular people, particularly, actually, interestingly, with men. A friendship with a sculptor called Barry Flanagan, a friendship with the poet Joseph Brodsky, but it all started with a friendship with a little boy I grew up with. So this is about him. And he was called Alexander, so we had the same name. His parents called Kit and Jim. And actually this links to something in your talk, you'll find out, just quite funny. So there are two bits. I'll be as fast as I can for you, sorry. Okay, Kit and Jim were taking me and Alexander to stay with their friends Roland Penrose and Lee Miller. The school bell rang, and I stood on my chair, vibrating with excitement at the weekend ahead. The chair tipped, and I was impaled on its back. There was a searing pain between my legs and a gushing wet sensation. It was a Friday lunchtime, so Natalie and Sandy were at work, and Puri, our pair girl, picked me up from school. At home, I found a mess of blood in my knickers. I changed them over and over again until the blood slowed, too shy to tell Puri. Kit drove us to a farmhouse in Sussex in her tiny Renault with a gear stick by the steering wheel. Outside stood a ship's figurehead, painted bright colours. Inside, the walls were filled with art, and on the tables lay ceramic ashtrays in the shapes of people's hands, piled high with cigarette stubs. I knew only that Roland had been a close friend of Picasso. It was many years before I saw the Man Ray photographs of the ethereal beauty Lee Miller. Each step I took hurt. I was the little mermaid. I told Alexander, but not the grown-ups. Roland took me by the hand to see the cows being milked through electric tubes. He walked with me to a field where a large bull stood in the tall grass. He held it by the giant ring through its nose and told me to stroke its forehead, the smell powerful, unsettling as its large presence. Lee smoked and cooked, drank gin, and talked in an American accent. I winced at the texture of her apricot fool and tried to hide it under my spoon. For a lark, Alexander and I squirted fly spray in the grown-ups' tooth mugs and put prickly holly in their beds, not on Jim or Lee's side, for they were scary, just for Kit and Roland, who was so kind. We lay on folded white sheets in the airing cupboard with the housekeeper's daughter, Georgina. How old do you want to be when you get married? 30, I replied, for I loved Joe March. 30? 30? That's far too old. I'll die if I'm not married at 18. I burned with shame at getting it wrong. Georgina took us for a walk. We reached high to pick cow parsley stems. We raided the grown-ups' ashtrays, split the cigarette stubs, picked out the shards of tobacco and stuffed them down the dry, prickly stems. We lit the ends and puffed, the tobacco rough in our young throats. The weekend I broke my hymen, smoked my first cigarette, and met Lee Miller. I was 11 years old. And then this is from later. Okay. Alexander had taken his O-levels and wanted to leave school. His friends at Holland Park Comprehensive were skinheads going into trades or the army. His cultivated parents' world no longer his. Kit and Jim were in Finland and he was staying with us. He had a scooter he convinced his parents to buy him. My parents were fearful for him. Our two families planned to meet in Venice, city of dreams. Alexander and I plotted a trip to Shetland too to visit his half-sister. We'll hitchhike, we said, as I squeezed a spot on his chin. He was a strange teenage boy, the most familiar thing in the world. His friends rang the doorbell. Alex has had an accident. A car hit him as he ran across the road. A policeman at the door. You must go to the hospital now, he said. In heavy skull sandals, my top flapping, I ran down Fawcett Street into Hollywood Road, crossing the Fulham Road to gloomy red-bricked St. Stephen's Hospital. We can't do anything, the nurse said to someone on the phone. I knew it was him. Please, can I be with him? I'm sorry, she said. I sat in A&E waiting for Natalie and Sandy to be found, waiting for my friend to die. The boy who shared my name and my birthday, sandy-haired, freckle-faced Alexander, who threw my swimsuit out of our hotel bedroom window at Lake Annecy so many times I hated him, who I told when blood trickled between my legs when I walked, the boy who had one willow tree and I the other in their cottage garden, with whom I had burping competitions in his bedroom at the cottage, with whom I stood on their balcony in Cheney Walk painting the houseboats. We were Dur and Dra. I was with him when I found raspberries growing wild in France, with him when we went sailing and got scared at the prow of the boat, the boy who I was going to travel with, become a grown-up with. He died on his own as I sat on a plastic chair in A&E. Sometimes Alexander comes to me in dreams. You're still alive, I think. My sort of brother, my almost twin, sharer of names and birthdays. Each breath I take is partly for you. Each year I'm alive is lived a bit for you.
Sorry. No, it's incredibly moving and important. It's important that he's there, isn't it?
Yes. Well, you had a similar thing,
so
didn't
similar,
you?
Yes.
Yeah.
So this glittering treasure of your life, which you're going to publish next year, is that right?
No, I deliver it next year.
You'll deliver it next year.
So it won't be published until 2027, so it'll be in better shape by then, I promise.
The whole cycle of publishing is it's a journey in itself, isn't it?
It is. You need a year to publish a book.
Yes,
wow.
Exactly. So talking of journeys, some of you may need to be going home soon, so I think it's a good moment to not throw you into the audience, but throw questions into the audience. Please do ask Alexandra, because it's a real honour that she's here with us this evening.
That was just wonderful, really, really beautiful and thrilling. We've been talking quite a bit actually today in the workshop, and also a lot at the Life Writing Centre, about memory and about the way that memory relates to memoir. And it seems from the bits that you've read us that you have an extremely vivid memory, and that scenes come back to you very, very sharply. I mean, are there things, when you're writing this, are there things you feel you can't quite remember, or that you have to say, I can't quite remember? I mean, are there gaps, or is it all very vivid?
There are huge gaps, enormous gaps, and I have a really bad memory for specifics, which is why I failed my exams all my life at school and failed to get into university, because I couldn't ever remember like dates or so. But my memory is very visual. The other side of myself is very, very visual, which is why I love art and I love textiles, I love colour. And so I do it, it's in pictures, really, is how I do it. And I think that's why your book helped me so much, was I thought you don't have to remember everything. You just have to conjure up the things that are there and hope that they will make sense to people. So yeah, I think memory is a really odd thing. And I think I have a particularly bad memory in lots of ways, but very vivid in other ways. Does that make sense, you think?
I wondered if there's any books or authors that you wish you'd been involved in, but you weren't, or one that got away.
Yes. Yes, there always are. There are always regrets. Life is full of these things. But actually, interestingly, the one that, because he published a book last year, which I absolutely love, and I was offered his first novel, is Hisham Matar. And that's because his most recent books, I think, are completely extraordinary. The Return and his new novel, My Friends, or whatever it's called. And also he's become a friend. So it's not as if, but I would have loved to have published those two books. But, you know, I often think that if they don't happen, they don't happen. They don't happen for good reason. And one's so incredibly blessed. You know, it's like having a riotous garden. You know, I don't go around thinking, oh, God. You know, there are terrible mistakes I've made. The biggest mistake I ever made was giving back the contract because the editor who was working on the book fell out so badly with the author. A particular book that would have literally saved Bloomsbury's fortunes after Harry Potter, which was The Dangerous Book for Boys. And I was a friend with the agent, and she begged me, because they fell out so badly, that I did that. And of course, it was the worst business decision of my life. But that's not the same as like longing to have published a book you love. It's different, you know.
Thank you so much. That was so moving. And there were so many aspects of what you were talking about that really struck home with me. I grew up in India and partly in Hyderabad, where we have very long history of caravans coming. I remember going into caravanserai that still exist, or old buildings. Also in Bombay, where we have very strong Beni Israeli and Baghdadi Jewish families that came probably from similar roots. But what I wanted to ask you actually was about publishing. So I have a research project I've been doing for a while about publishers of Oriental texts, of publishers of Asian languages in Europe in the 19th century, and how they helped shape the way, sort of publishers as an unseen agent in the way taste is shaped in culture, and particularly through the construction of series. So this has been done with things like the Victorian series. You know, there's lots of sort of history of books, stuff about that. But I was interested in the way in which shapes are changed about others through publishers. And I wondered if you could talk about that.
I think that's an incredibly interesting thing, which I'm thinking about now at this point in my life more than before. But I think that that is one of the things that publishers do, is that they shape culture, and they do it in a very soft way. And you often don't know you're doing it. So the Virago Modern Classics series definitely did. And what was extraordinary about it in the 80s is that people would go into a shop and just buy a classic without knowing anything about the author or the book, because they trusted that series. For me, as a child, the book that changed my life, I've now realized, the book that changed my life was a book. My father used to work in West Africa in the school holidays to earn extra money, and he'd been in West Africa during the war, and he fell in love with it, and he used to go to Ghana and Nigeria. And he came back from Nigeria one year with a book, and he gave it to me, and he said, "You must read this, it's fantastic." And it was Achebe's Things Fall Apart. And when I read that book, everything, and I was 13 or something when I read it, 13 or 14, it was like the world completely shifted on its axis. And there's that image in it when the white man rides into a village and they tie his bicycle to a tree. And it was that thing of seeing the world from a completely different viewpoint. And I think that the Heinemann African Writers series was an utter culture change. I think that's like a great treasure trove that happened, in our time in publishing. So I think that series are very, very important in that way. And I don't know enough about 19th century publishing. I really know nothing about it, so I can't. But I do think, and it's usually the idea of like one person. It's like it was common, it's like he's called James, the man that ran the African Writers. It's one person. It's like a curator. It's like incredible collectors of art, and they are often more interesting than museum collections. There was an incredible those Russian brothers who collected modern art, and there was the show in the Royal Academy, and that their taste, is like Gertrude Stein's taste. There's something so exciting about what comes out of like one person's brain, But yes, publishing does do that, and I think it's not talked about in that way. It's always talked about as an industry, which is so irritating, because it is much more than that, really.
Yeah, it was not the 19th, it's not the 19th, what I was thinking about is that you did that, in the sense that, because traditionally, when we think of classics, they're often decided by white men sitting somewhere in an office, and the idea that there were people like you changing the way in which people understood what a classic was.
Yes.
Is really what I was getting.
Yeah. But I think that those are more, that was done deliberately. But I think other sorts of publishing, the kind of softer way of doing it, I mean, it's quite interesting given what's happened culturally, the great shift, a very important shift that's happened, that started, I suppose, with Black Lives Matter. But it's quite funny for me because I look back over my publishing career, and in a way, I have always published outside Britain. For me, publishing Abdulrazak Gurnah's By the Sea 20-something years ago was a really important thing for me. I thought I was going to leave Bloomsbury and he would be probably pushed out because they weren't really selling, and then guess what? He got the Nobel Prize and everything changed. But I didn't know that was ever going to happen. I was miserable when his novel Afterlives wasn't even longlisted for the Booker Prize. I literally changed the publication date to be within the Booker because of the chair that year, because of what was happening culturally, and I thought this is going to be his moment, and he wasn't longlisted. And so, but you are, and Liz Calder was the same because she was from New Zealand, she'd lived in Brazil for years, so her publishing was international, my publishing was international. We didn't do it deliberately. We didn't know we were doing it. Do you see what I mean? So I think you can do it deliberately to change a culture, or you can do it without knowing you're doing it, but it is sort of doing it at the same time. So there are different ways, I think.
Thanks very much. Thank you, Alexandra, for that wonderful talk, and for Claire's input as well, and for giving us an insight into your long and illustrious career. What I wanted to just talk about a little bit, or ask you about, is about being an editor of yourself when you're writing a memoir. I mean, that's such a kind of double whammy, isn't it? I mean, it's a lifetime of both as an agent and a publisher of reading other people's work and assessing them. But it's not just it's not an ordinary non-fiction or a fictional work. This is a memoir. And I mean, do you edit on the hoof, or are you going to wait till the end and
Because I'm teaching, I'm thinking about that all the time because I'm teaching, a lot now. And what I always say to people is don't edit on the hoof, keep going, get your first draft, and then you've got your clay. You have to have it there, and then get to work on it. But that said, it's the editing I like the most. It's like and everybody is different. Everybody's different. Some people edit as they go along, and some people don't. But people who are like having their first go at writing, I would say, I always say just do it. I have now definitely a first draft, but it's the order of it, because I've got so many different strands. This is
problem, isn't it?
That is the thing that's going to confound me, and I'm hoping that my editor, because I have a publisher in the UK and I also have one in America, and they work together very well. And I'm hoping that when I get to the point where I can't see it anymore, that they can help me, because I know I'm going to need help. So it's horses for courses, but I always say to people, just try and get a first draft out. And then it's fun. It's the best bit, is doing the editing. Editing is super fun. It's the agony is getting it down.
Just, Kate Clanchy, given some developments in modern publishing, I just wondered if you felt you got out at the right time.
Yes. In a word, I got to the point where I was really ready to go, and I was finding it quite hard being told what to think by. I was actually, you know.
And morally condemned.
Yes, yeah, and I'm from a different era, and it was time for me to go. And I decided soon after I joined Bloomsbury, I decided I would leave and I would step away completely, and I should do it before I hit 70. But boy, it was the right moment for me. Yeah.
Hello, I have a quick question. Thank you, I really enjoyed the talk. It was amazing and far-reaching, and you've got a wealth of experience that's very valuable to everybody here. I just wondered about the actual writing process, sitting down and actually writing. How are you finding it? Is it lonely? Is it frustrating? What's the actual process of writing feeling like?
It's very, very strange. So when I was doing it secretly that summer, it was a bit like having a secret love affair. It was just incredible fun and exciting, and I'd wake up every morning excited and go down. And then I did the thing of getting a deal, and it was suddenly very public. But that was weird. That was very weird. But it was also, I got to this moment, this realization that it had to be more than just like a sweet memoir, that it had to find truth. And I think truth in life writing is incredibly important. And by that, I don't mean telling everything, absolutely not, but that it should have an essential truth. And finding that is quite painful, I think. And I found out all sorts of things about myself that were painful and that have had quite profound effects on the life I'm living now. So it's like they're booby traps. It is opening a kind of Pandora's box, and I don't even quite know where it's going to lead me, to be honest. It's very odd. But it's also thrilling. Yeah, it really is.
Yeah. Part of this is homage and part is a question. I just wanted to comment that as an editor, you are completely unique and unusual in that it seemed to me you could resonate with a whole range of completely different authors and just intuitively understand what they were doing. And that's terribly unusual. The other thing is, it struck me that you were extraordinary in the way you were able to bring on younger people in publishing. Mm. So when you left, you could leave a really healthy scene behind you because you were so good at, giving opportunities, encouraging younger people who then became editors. Mm. But about the writing, I wanted to ask you, how are you alternating your personal experience with the history, or do you have some idea of the structure of the book?
I wish I could say, this is Barbara Torpedo, who is one of the greatest writers I've ever worked with. One of the most amazing things in my life has been working with Barbara. I'm finding my way with that, Barbara. It's a mess at the moment, and unexpected things are happening. Like I thought I would do the journeying bits. They are going to be spliced in between the the history and the childhood, but I thought it would be in the order of when I did the journeys with my son, but suddenly Mauritania has found itself early on in the most unexpected place, and I'm thinking, what the fuck? I don't know why it's here. So I don't know what's going to happen, and this is the really hard thing I've got ahead. And to go back to that earlier question, I'm finding it really hard. I always thought that I had more sympathy to writers than a lot of editors because my friends are writers and not publishers. I'm not really interested in the publishing industry in that way. But there were things I realized I didn't understand, and one is where you write. And when people would say, I can't write at home, I don't know, I need to find, I would think, what's the problem? You've got a house, find a room, And I understand that so well, and I'm now understanding things about the physical act of writing and how you do it that I couldn't imagine when I was an editor.
It's quite different from any other sort of writing. It's different from journalism, writing fiction.
Yeah.
And it's sort of the way, Jesus crosses the Jordan in a boat before he makes declarations, or you have to get yourself into another place because it's the other side of your head, isn't it?
Completely. Yes. And sometimes I just can't get there. And then suddenly I'm there. But that's my struggle is getting into that place. And it is extraordinary how different it is from any other work I've ever done.
It's not inhibiting that
I edit
about an instinct to edit yourself. So do you just get it all down because it doesn't matter? It's not as though the boy next door is going to steal your diary and read it. It's only you.
Yes, it's only me,
and then you can edit afterwards.
And I will. I absolutely will. But for me, at the moment, it's the shaping is the really hard thing. And then I think I'm going to enjoy. I just know that it's like, as you said, it's paring back. It's like when I was reading, it's like I've got to take that out. I've got to take that out. I know there'll be a lot of that. I kind of know how I'm going to do it. I know what my voice is, for better or worse. But it's finding the shape of it is going to be the most difficult thing. And I think with everything, I have no idea if it's any good. I mean, what the hell? It's...
Do you read it out loud?
No, but I will, because I remember you saying, and Esther always reads out loud, and I think I need to do that, because you read out loud, don't you?
Yes.
Yeah.
But I think, yes, it's just, I don't know.
But do you read out loud as you're going along? Do you edit as you go along?
No, not really. I think just get it all down.
I think that's what you have to do, really. And then you see what the creature is.
It's sort of like staging, isn't it?
Yes. Yes, it is.
I don't know, was it Shaw who used the expression the sarcastic bystander? That, you only need to bring in the sarcastic bystander once you've got it all down.
Yeah.
And I just started reading Shaw again because I'm going to Mrs. Warren's profession. But
you have to get it. You have to get it down. Yeah, you do.
Yeah, I'm quite interested in the pattern it will make.
But I think it's
story and the historical story, which goes back so far.
I know, but there's not that much. I mean, there's not. People keep saying, "Oh God, you must do so much research," and no. In fact, I had dinner with Elizabeth Gilbert a year ago, and she said, "Honey, don't do research." She said, she said I had shelves of books for when I was writing Big Magic, and I didn't look at any of them. She said, "Don't bother." And I do a certain amount, but not that much. I don't know. I don't really. It's so mysterious, the whole thing. I don't quite know where it's all coming from, or where it's going to go to. But it's not unlike editing, because when I edit, and this is the weird thing about editing, is that just before I'm going to meet an author, I'm talking about it in the present, but it's obviously in the past because I don't anymore, I don't know what I'm going to say. I literally don't know what I'm going to say. I can't remember the names of any of the characters in the book, and I often end up, if I'm not wise and write them down, by saying the protagonist's wife's best friend. So it's always by their relationships, you know. But it comes from some other bit of me. I literally start talking, I talk rubbish for a bit, and then it starts coming out. So I know what I'm going to say, but I don't know, at the top of my head, I know it from inside. In a way, that's how I write, I think. Very similar.
Well, I think that's a wonderful note to end on. That whispering underneath the object, the whispering of that Kate mentioned earlier.
Absolutely.
The sort of the knowing but not knowing in the forefront of your mind. I think it's inspiring and exciting, and we all wish you huge good writing going forward.
Thank you. Thank you all for
Thank you very much.
listening to me.